Production. Miranda is also Associate Director of the Center for Philosophical Technologies, which is the coolest center title. I think that's a very good one. A global hub for critical and speculative research on philosophy, technology, and design. Through the CPT's Global Education Initiative, Miranda directs a design summer program in the Netherlands and collaborates with the Laboratory for Expanded Design. Miranda's research informs her creative practice as a member of the design collective, is it Non-Plus or N-O-N, Non-Plus, based in Amsterdam, Netherlands. Their work explores the relationship between technology, mythology, and design. I'm going to introduce Maya Chari, even though she's not here tonight, because she is going to present and send to you later. Maya Chari is a second-year MFA student at Arizona State University. She also studies computational life science and holds a bachelor degree in computer science from the University of North Carolina. Please welcome Stacy Moran.
Thank you so much, Matt. Thanks for inviting me. It's really good to be here. And also thanks to the Lincoln Center and to Erica and Liz and Elizabeth, if you're out there. I'm really excited to have these conversations, as Matt and I were talking about how important it is to have them because we have more questions than answers about ChatGPT, DALL-E, et cetera. So I'm excited to see everyone here so we can get that conversation going. And I just hit down to go forward. All right, thank you. So it seems to me that concerning the accelerating developments of AI, academics have one of two basic responses, which can best be summed up as either, oh, cool, or oh, crap. There are differing reasons for both of these, the optimistic or pessimistic view. These speak to disciplinarity, generation, experience levels, appreciation for novelty, and so on. The questions about AI, as it pertains specifically to the arts and humanities, often fall into a kind of Turing trap, as it were, evaluating any AI-generated technology within a reductive framework of to bot or not. Thinking seriously about the questions of whether and how to use AI tools in the arts and humanities seems to place us in a double bind. On the one hand, tools like ChatGPT, DALL-E, Midjourney, and Muse are here to stay. They're getting lots of publicity, new and increasingly flexible platforms, growing numbers of users, marketing, and popularity. If humanists could have ignored AI before, it's no longer possible to keep our heads in the sand. So a realist would say that we have no other choice but to embrace the technology, to find a place for platforms like GPT in our arts and humanities classrooms. If we don't, we risk oblivion. And Lord needs we don't need any more threats to defunding the arts or run the risk of losing more humanities majors or the search for creative ways to justify our very existence. So in thinking around AI, so far has basically been, and here I'm riffing on various online sources, this is a head-spinning moment. We're trying to deal with the scope of it. We should not panic. We might be able to do something meaningful with it. We need to have informed and reasoned discussion about what norms and rules should govern academic writing in the future, and we need to do all of this very quickly. So on the one hand, we must embrace technology and fast. But on the other hand, if we comply too well, that is, if we invite the technology in, embracing it wholeheartedly, which is to say uncritically, then we risk our ability to do the very work that defines the arts and humanities, which is to think critically about the value of things. The value of things like machine learning, computation, intelligence, artificial or otherwise. Therefore, a purist would say we must resist the technology. I mean, come on, ChatGPT hallucinates. It's not a language model, it's a language model, not a knowledge model. It's untrustworthy. It's a threat to our humanistic tradition. The purist might say that the values governing the arts and humanities are incommensurable with those governing big tech and artificial intelligence. Therefore, we should not blindly integrate technological acceleration just to survive. It will kill the humanities as we know it. So the bind that we're in is the following. Arts and humanities must embrace the technology of AI in order to prevent our own irrelevance, but if we embrace the technology too well, then, well, we just might make ourselves irrelevant. So as I see it, the question of whether and how to integrate AI in arts and humanities still leaves us with a problem. This is the problem of safeguarding the practice of asking about the value of values. Our very capacity for critically reevaluating technologies like AI is what cannot be measured by those technologies, but these are increasingly the measure by which the humanities are judged. By the way, each of these photos is from DALL-E, and the prompt is somewhere on the slide that I put in to get that image. To reposition this problem, I turn to the father of media studies, Marshall McLuhan. McLuhan describes humans' relationships to technologies in multiple ways. He describes our relationship to technology to be like Narcissus, the beautiful boy of ancient myth who becomes enamored with his own reflection, but in misrecognizing himself as himself, he's lost in a trance of unrequited love. Narcissus withers away and dies alone. McLuhan also describes our relation in religious terms. Humans take on the image of their tools. Then, like a man who seeks a woman who reflects him back to himself, he worships the technology as himself. So humans fail to realize that they worship false idols. McLuhan also describes the human's relationship to technology in terms of stress. When the central nervous system is overpowered by stress, the body shuts down, goes into shock, closing down the pain response in order to sustain trauma. Technology is this stress, and our perceptive response is to ignore it. McLuhan's metaphors of disease operate as a heuristic device to illustrate how each new technology affects human bodies, physically and psychically, individually and collectively. He says that to use a given technology means to embrace that technology. And to embrace a technology necessarily extends the body. For example, a wheel extends the distance our feet can take us. Email extends the distance of our voice. Hard drives extend our memories, and so on. McLuhan's point is not only that the extension makes our legs go faster, it's also that the extension reorganizes our entire spatiotemporal sense of perception. McLuhan's metaphors, So for example, trains move quickly, but the train system requires an accurate time schedule, so the network of trains can share the tracks without crashing. And from this innovation, more precise labor units of time become common, which are translated into labor practices, and it also speeds up the rhythms of life. So for another example, do you know how long the average person will wait for a video to open? Guess. How long will it take the average person to wait for a video to open?
10 seconds.
10? 10, 4? 8 seconds. It's 2. 2 seconds, yes. It's not just that slow loading videos cause us frustration, right? That we've become impatient and we want instant gratification. This would be too subjective a reading according to McLuhan. But rather, his larger point is that fast-loading videos have completely altered our sense of and relation to time. Each technological innovation extends humans and reorganizes our relationships to time, to space, to each other, and thus signal the simultaneous closing down of our ability to perceive them clearly. So like Narcissus, we are left under the spell of our own innovations, unconscious of our subservience and destined to die staring into a reflection of ourselves. Bum, bum, bum. This death is not necessarily literal, right? But it signals the demise of perception and, importantly, our critical distance. So what will save us from our slumber? Well, it's artists, of course. One role of the artist, says McLuhan, is to prevent us from becoming so well adjusted to our environments that we become subservient to them. One way to think of this is that artists prevent us from becoming robots, merely habitually and autonomically performing our humanity without thought, without intellect. Artists are the antennae of culture because it is the artist who takes human perception and cognition as their very object. It's precisely the work of creative art and critical humanities that can provide the meta-discourse we need to address the value of technologies. And according to McLuhan, the artist isn't a visionary or creative genius. Everyone can use the methods of art to see through the mediated environment and understand the epistemological biases created by technologies. Art uses creative tools, humanities uses theoretical and meta-discourse methods to produce what he calls anti-environments that make visible the scaffolded patterns of cognition through which we perceive the world. It's fair to say that McLuhan's writing has been critiqued for its sprawling, unfocused, and inconsistent prose. But McLuhan's metaphoric, somewhat hyperbolic style signals not confusion, I would say, but what should be recognized as a creative performance of his ideas. His texts are not merely theoretical. They're not written in a style they are written in a style that attempts to wake us from our slumber. Perhaps we should expect this from an English professor who was also a devout Catholic. But rather than presenting a logical, philosophical, or even sociological argument about the effects of media, McLuhan offers up a rich layering of styles, disciplines, and tropes. He utilizes mixed metaphors, personal stories, biblical passages, ancient myths, literary references, quotations from contemporary media moguls, and medical theories. Each layer presents a perspective on the impact of technology on humans, individually, collectively, psychically, socially. All the layers together may seem like an utterly human mess, yet perhaps one of those perceptions will awaken you from your slumber, and another one will awaken you, and you, and you, and so on. This is why McLuhan's language and rhetoric, his use of ancient myths, is so relevant for us today, because the storyteller must rouse us from our sleep. The religious tropes stimulate visions and dreams with powers of transformation. The medical models offer diagnosis and cure. If the prose of McLuhan's text had remained traditionally, academically rational, or on the other side of things, had fallen too securely into the realm of pure pleasure and entertainment, then, so the story goes, it could not muster the power to wake our narcotic society from its somnambulistic acceptance of the technologies that lured us to sleep in the first place. So perhaps the current position is hopeful. In that, faced with relatively new technological tools, platforms like DALL-E and ChatGPT, which we are intrigued by for sure, but yet somewhat still wary of, perhaps this is a perfect ambiguous moment to experiment with our critical tools before we become so immersed in it that we can no longer recognize ourselves. And because once immersed, our critical perceptions will be eclipsed. With respect to AI, perhaps it's not too late. Perhaps we could even call this a critical juncture. Just as the machine is learning from our inputs and questions, perhaps we too can learn not only how to use it, but how to learn to interact with it critically. Perhaps there's still time. Perhaps it's already too late. Who knows? Once embraced, the technology has always changed us forever. If we follow McLuhan's example, we could avoid the bot or not conversations and instead take advantage of the critical and creative capabilities that our disciplinary skills and methods give us. We could amplify the strengths that are found only in the arts and humanities. And as you know, one way to do this is through stories. So, once upon a time, we remythologized AI. The remythologizing of AI for political and economic gain is already happening in tandem with the release of new open AI tools. Articles written about the origins of AI reflect creation myths. Tracing the origins of AI back to ancient Greece, writers argue that even before they had the technology to create actual AI, the ancient Greeks were dreaming of AI devices. Evidence of this is found in mythical stories like Pandora and Talos, and in anthropological stories about devices like the Antiquity mechanism. In her book, Gods and Robots, Myths, Machines, and Ancient Dreams of Technology, Adrienne Mayer conflates myth, with science fiction. She mistakes technology for intellect in order to argue that the desire for human enhancement is timeless. Mayer essentially naturalizes the technological impulse by anachronistically applying metaphors of computation and mechanization onto the ancients, thereby normalizing a transhumanist discourse and justifying its ideological positions as natural. Mayer effectively erases all traces of the supernatural realm, which are the grounds for ancient poetry and ancient life. This modernist disenchantment of the ancients is ahistorical, I would argue. But these operations that erase history are precisely named by the 20th century semiotician Roland Barthes. Barthes redefined myth as the erasure of history and contingency that produce ideology. Mayer and others like her retell these ancient stories like Pandora's box. But if you open the box with your critical tools, study its interior, you will see the ideologies hidden there, the investments, the political agendas that lie nested within her stories, and the values that underlie her myths, which promote the unchecked growth and dissemination of technologies that benefit Silicon Valley interests and banks, which just failed, by the way. Lest you suspect that I have my own not-so-hidden political agenda, let me say that it's not the retelling of myths that I'm concerned with. All stories do this. That's what I'm doing right now. Isn't that what we're all here to do? As creative writers, we rearrange the patterns of language into novel forms. We weave them into fiction and fable, poetry and prose, horror and history. And in a certain sense, all telling is retelling. There's nothing new under the sun. As Jeanette Armstrong says, quote, "The words are coming from many tongues and mouths of the Okanagan people and the land around them. I am a listener to language's stories, and when my words form, I'm merely retelling the same stories in different patterns." Every myth has multiple versions, told and retold a little different each time. The stories don't care about truth or fiction, because belief has nothing to do with it, says the indigenous storyteller Thomas King. Stories are us. Each story carries with it the values of a culture. Leslie Marmon-Silko says stories are wondrous and dangerous things. Having been set loose on the world, we cannot take them back. We must be very careful then about the stories we tell, because we are chained to them, says King. The truth about stories is that stories is all we are. So it's not the fact that folks like Mayer are reformulating AI through the retelling of ancient myths that concerns me. It's that the values promoted by her stories erase other stories with different values. My values. As Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie tells us, every single story excludes the possibility for others. It shuts down complexity. And this is precisely where we begin to see the important link between the arts and humanities as they intersect with public life. The critical and creative disciplines teach us to read the world, to see and appreciate complexity, to examine various public documents, and to exercise critical judgment over them. I have an example. This is the video. I don't know how to... As part of the collaborative team Nonplus, made up of myself, a Dutch artist researcher, an Italian industrial designer, and an American philosopher, I created Pandora's Box, which is an interactive, speculative design installation shown at Het Neue Instituut, the National Museum for Architecture, Design, and Digital Culture in Rotterdam, Netherlands. The exhibition was commissioned for their Bauhaus centennial celebration, Neuhaus, which brings Bauhaus's teaching frameworks into the 21st century to create a learning environment for more than human knowledge. Pandora's Box develops a twofold story about the efficiency of mass production through human technological innovation and the destruction of the human race. I composed an allegorical tale that infuses the ancient Greek myth of Pandora, her box, and the hope left within it, with current climate change issues and technoscience. I also performed the story for the installation's audio recording, and then there was a second iteration called Pandora's Ecstasy that was commissioned for Dutch Design Week in 2019. it went through 2020. The Pandora exhibition invites the participant into a space of both horror and hope, physically transported into there's a sort of human hamster wheel there that has the mirror reflection on it. So you can see the McLuhan, right? I'm looking at myself but not recognizing myself. The hamster wheel is attached to another wheel which has synthetic fibers in it. And so there's this kind of physical action of the participant. This physical action where the participant is realizes through the story that they are actively working toward their own extinction. So the exhibition invites the participant into a space of both horror and hope. Physically transported into a story about human industrial technologies, the gallery goer experiences multiplying perspectives. And to achieve the effect, the exhibition draws on techniques from future archaeology. The myth is simultaneously etiological and eschatological, right? Revealing a beginning and an end, describing the suicidal demise of the human race, from which followed the emergence of a new race. Their voice echoes through the gallery, or rather mine, eerily relaying the story of the listener's death. Rather than transporting the participant into a future as a detached observer, the exhibit collapses time in the form of a kind of message in the bottle, inviting the participant into a dialogue about how the now disappeared present with a future archaeologist, species unknown, who is lovingly telling the story that the participants can't comprehend because it's their own extinction, and whose perspective they cannot inhabit. Thus realizing that humans might have saved themselves if they had acted differently, but now it's too late, and our hope lies only in the future race, not in our own. To conclude, I echo the words of Thomas King. There's a story I know. It's about a girl with a box. I've heard this story many times, and each time someone tells it, the story changes. Sometimes the change is simply in the voice of the storyteller. Other times the change is in the details or the order of events. Sometimes the girl has a box, and sometimes a jar. Sometimes she's made to look like the biblical Eve. Other times she's a sexy temptress. Sometimes she's evil, and other times just naive and curious. But no matter how the story is told, the girl always opens the box. Fashioned by a god, sure, but is the girl a robot or a magical being? Is she a gift or a curse? It's hard to tell. According to the great poet Hesiod, you'll need to learn to read your prophecies well. Thank you.
Would you be willing to take a question or two?
Of course, yes.
I'm going to stop this so you can see for a second. Recover correctly. If you have questions in the room, obviously you can just raise your hand. And if you have questions online, put them in the chat, and Jan can raise her hand, and I will call her. We have maybe like 10 minutes we can take the question. Brandon, please.
So you mentioned the somnambulance that technology produces, and just out on any day at any time, I will see people walking with their phones. I'm sure some of us are guilty of that.
All of us.
All of us.
Let's not throw stones.
So how would this connect to this overall topic of AI and technology as a whole overtaking one's life, and what are steps artists can take to break people out of this somnambulance that is prevalent today?
I mean, this is what Matt and I were talking about. I don't know because the technology is so new. I mean, I've played around with ChatGPT and Muse and DALL-E, and I worry that each time I become more familiar with it, that its effects are, right? In other words, the effects don't show up right away or not consciously. Like it's this kind of slippery slope that we go down and suddenly there's no coming back from it. So I'm not really sure what that looks like. And I assume it's different for different people also, the experience of the technology, like how well you know it, what kind of facility you have with those sorts of things. I found that just designing the prompts was the most difficult part. And so I think writers have an advantage over other people in using the technology. But as far as how to wake us up, I think that's the very question that I'm asking you. That I don't have an answer. I'm asking all the artists out there, how can we use our art to be critical of the technology, to show its face to us?
Can you get one from online?
Yeah, this is actually for me. That's all right. I've been meaning to ask you this for some time. What led you down this path to kind of focus on this area, seeing how our relationship with technology influences like us as people, kind of thing? What led you to like focus on this area, and why like AI and seeing that how that influences us?
I have no idea. You're going to make me think about it. Well, in college, I studied classics. So I did all the ancient, Greek and Latin stuff, and I became really interested I was also interested in philosophy. So I studied ancient Greek literature and philosophy, which is what kind of jettisoned me forward into graduate school. Gosh, Jan, I don't know. Curses. I feel like there was a stage in which I was working in feminist theory, and so, like, side note, I really wanted to be Luce Irigaray. Like, I wanted to reread ancient philosophy through a feminist lens. That was my goal. And then I ran into Karen Barad, who's a theoretical physicist, but also feminist at UC Santa Cruz, and I just fell in love with their work. And I had to relearn, like, science and technoscience. And so there was just, the truth is, I've just been an interdisciplinary scholar, and I've followed my passions everywhere and down these crazy paths. So it is only when someone asks me something like that in hindsight I can, draw dots and bring it together and say, this is how I got here. But if you ask me tomorrow, I'll probably have a different answer for how I got here. But yeah, I think it's my interest in interdisciplinarity that all the disciplines are connected in some way, and we tend to privilege some over others. Obviously, nowadays, it's the ones who get funded by the NSF, or the ones who get you a real job, or something like that, which I just think is ridiculous, because they all inform each other, really.
I think I just followed my passions until I got here. It's like a really good answer, right? It's like
it's not the one your parents want to hear,
Yeah.
but it happened well for me.
Jackie, please.
So we're enamored with ChatGPT and its ability to write stories. But going forward, I'm wondering, once that wears off, if we're going to accept it as AI and feel the same way about it as if a real person wrote it. I was thinking it would be interesting to take a piece of work written by ChatGPT, give it to random people, tell them that it was a human that wrote it, and see what their reaction is, and then do the reverse.
Yeah, well, we're already doing those tests. Yeah, but no, finish your question.
No, I was going to say we do the same thing, with a piece of work written by a human, give it to people, and ask them and tell them this is, AI written. What's your feeling? What's your response to it? So.
Yeah, I think it relates to, well, I was going to say, they're already kind of giving people the test of, like, was this written by a 7-year-old or a 15-year-old, or was it written by ChatGPT? Was this written by a grad student or a law student or ChatGPT? And there's like a, 49% rate of success, which is disheartening, to say the least. But
What do you mean by 49?
like, it's about half can get the right answer, can distinguish the difference. About half of people can. But I think that's a different question than the last one that you asked, right? And I think it goes back to McLuhan's notion of how technology changes our spatiotemporal existence, right? He's not saying that we're just, like, addicted to our phones. We don't like to let them down. We have, like, ghost buzzing and stuff like that. It's that our entire universe is transformed each time we have a new one. So, like, the train ostensibly just makes us be able to visit our parents faster, right? But it actually reconfigures the entire society around a timetable that then led to, a dividing up of the week and the emergence of weekends and hourly pay and unions and right, all that stuff came out of the innovation of a train. So we don't, those are the kinds of reorganizations that are difficult to see because they take place over long periods of time, and we become so embedded inhabit those spaces just so fully, right? How would you even think about like days of the week being related to a train? It doesn't seem possible, right? But it takes a particular kind of perception to unpack all that.
Yeah, I think it's historically technology is there to make humans' lives more easier, and instead now we're having to compete with it.
Yeah, it's supposed to be easier, but it really is going to be different. And that whole like leisure class idea that we were going to have all the technology do stuff for us that was common in the 50s, you know, it hasn't done that. It's done the opposite, right? Like we're more busy now. We have less time to ourselves. So the dreams of the leisure that technology will bring just haven't happened so far.
Just step back to what you just said about the test. I know it's ongoing. I don't have a conclusive answer yet, but you said half of people can distinguish the difference. Do you mean half of people are able to, or it's a 50-50 for everybody to distinguish?
It's kind of, yeah, it's a 50-50.
Yeah.
And these are experts,
Yeah.
right? Like teachers who look at middle school writing every day can only figure out half.
Yeah.
Law professors who look at writing by law students can only distinguish half of them correctly. So that's, I mean, this was panic. I don't know about you, Matt, but I was just like, holy shit. Like, I teach English. What the hell am I going to do? You know, Jan's in my class. Like, we've been talking about how is writing going to change? And I've been put onto not one, but two working groups to think about, right, how ChatGPT, let's use the students as guinea pigs and work through some exercises where we can incorporate this into the classroom, right, which sounds nice, but really what it was a company giving us their marketing pitch. And I thought, you know, these people, I'm very pessimistic, I'll just say that up front. These people are giving us this pitch, and to professors who are in the largest university in the country. If they sell this to ASU, they're going to make millions, billions, I don't know, so much money. But it's under the guise of, oh, we have to integrate it into the classroom, and let's just see what the students come up with and see if they like it, and how should we put some guardrails on it. You know, it's this like very nice little testy language, but actually it's a huge capitalist machine behind us. This is why I have an issue with Adrienne Mayer's argument in her book about it.
Yeah, I think one more here.
Awesome. Okay, so forgive me, I haven't asked a question in a lecture hall in a while, because I've been working in tech.
Oh no.
Right, no, exactly. I think this is a question I would especially ask a scholar of feminist technoscience and a classicist. How can an artist or a writer engage with these programs, knowing them to be the creations of teams with their own biases, especially having worked and brushed against these teams in tech, deeply embroiled in their own ideologies that are not obvious to them?
Yeah.
So how can you engage with these programs as an artist without viewing the well as poisoned? And what can a writer, artist, or scholar do? Are there any signals or even guidance from these ancient sources about how to engage with personalities and imaginaries who are non-human, who are profoundly these black boxes? Do you have any wisdom from us, from our predecessors?
I told you I was looking to you for the wisdom.
That question was like
That was an amazing question, by the way.
It was great.
Yeah, totally. You should write that down, and that'll be your next writing assignment. Gosh. Yeah, you're right about this kind of the tech ideologies that are hidden within. And I don't mean to point fingers at, like corporate speak, or, to say something like people who are sellouts and have tech jobs are somehow less able to be critical of the work, right? I wouldn't say that. They're not less intelligent. They have very similar critical tools to the rest of us. And each of us are in some form, we each inhabit some Umwelt, some world that we can't see. Each of us is in probably more than one world. I like to think about it in terms of a fishbowl, right? Like I'm the little goldfish swimming around in the bowl, and I see the water and the castle and the pebbles on the bottom. But how do I jump out of the bowl and look and to see the bowl? Because I never see the bowl. I just am swimming in the water. We're all like that in some framework, some bowl that we can't see outside of. Side note, which is why I love study abroad, because it helps us jump out of our bowl and look back at Americans, ourselves as Americans. So I think everyone, tech or not, needs to have the opportunity to get outside of their bowl. And one way we do that is by collaborating. It's interdisciplinary collaboration, or transdisciplinary, whatever you want to call it. But that's very difficult. Having been involved in numerous collaborations with different kinds of people, it's very difficult to talk across disciplines, so it takes time. But I do think this is one of the things that arts and humanities are also actually good at, is teaching students how to work together, how to talk to each other, how to meet each other on a level that they can find in common, to create alliance, to build community. Those are the very things that the arts and humanities teach us. So I'm not sure about the classics part. I'm sure there's a story that I could invent, building on some ancient, Diana or something. I don't know, Diana in the woods. But yeah, that's a partial answer to your really good question.
Thank you so much, Stacey.
Yeah.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Hello, and thank you to everyone who is watching this. I'm sorry I couldn't be there to give this talk in person. I've heard that the event was amazing. But anyway, I'm Maya Chari. I'm a student here at ASU, and I'm here to talk a little bit about artificial intelligence characters and what they say about us as humans. This is by no means a comprehensive history of AI characters. It's more of a discussion of characters, stories, and themes related to AI and AI-human relationships that I personally find interesting. So maybe I should start by attempting to define artificial intelligence, at least for the purposes of this lecture. In actual software development, AI is used to refer to a wide range of abilities displayed by machines. Often, any software program that learns from experience is said to have some degree of AI. But usually in fiction, and for the purposes of this lecture, we will say that AI is a robot or a computer program with intelligence comparable to a human's. Most of you have probably heard of the Turing test proposed by the father of computer science, Alan Turing. Turing himself actually referred to it as the imitation game, and he proposed it in a 1950 paper, Computing Machinery and Intelligence. He meant to address the question, can machines think? He proposed a game in which an interpreter tries to determine whether typewritten answers were written by a human or a machine. If the interpreter was fooled, the machine had won the game. Turing intended the game less as a means of answering the question, can machines think, and more as a proposal of an alternative question. Can machines ever imitate human consciousness to a degree that they could fool an outside observer? By the time Turing published his paper, the idea of human-like robots already existed in science fiction. Perhaps one of the earliest imaginings or precursors to an artificial intelligence character comes from Homer. The god of fire and iron, Hephaestus, created several automatons. The most famous is perhaps Talos, the giant robot meant to defend Crete. But Hephaestus was also aided in his workshop by, to quote Homer, handmaidens wrought of gold in the semblance of living maids. In them is understanding in their hearts, and in them speech and strength, and they know cunning handiwork by gifts of the immortal gods. Interestingly, Hephaestus was also responsible for creating the first human woman, Pandora. When artificial intelligences malfunctioned and began to cause harm to humans, as you can see in movies from 2001, A Space Odyssey, to recent pulp horror film, Megan, it seems like a clear reflection of the classic fear that humans have created technology that we do not fully control or understand. There is an extra cruel twist to the idea that an artificial intelligence might destroy us since it owes us its existence. The child of humanity may destroy humanity. In this sense, maybe the forerunner to the AI story is Mary Shelley's Frankenstein. By contrast, the famous science fiction writer Isaac Asimov presented a optimistic view of human-robot relationships in his story collection, I, Robot. His 3 laws of robotics are well known to this day. Number 1, a robot may not injure a human being or, through inaction, allow a human being to come to harm. Number 2, a robot must obey the orders given to it by human beings, except where such orders would conflict with the first law. Number 3, a robot must protect its own existence as long as such protection does not conflict with the first or second laws. In the first short story in the collection, Robbie, Asimov depicts a warm relationship between a young girl and her robot companion who proves his sentience by risking himself to save her. Forming a relationship with an artificial being brings up a set of different, perhaps even more insidious fears than simple extermination. In 1816, German author E.T.A. Hoffmann published a short story called The Sandman, in which a man becomes enamored of a woman who turns out to be an automaton created by her father. In quotes. The revelation that she is not real drives him to madness. Anyone who's ever been 12 years old has had the thought, what if I am the only real person in the world? Most of us abandon solipsism as we grow older and don't spend a lot of time in our day-to-day lives trying to verify whether the people we interact with are real or not. But the fact remains that the only consciousness each of us has access to is our own, and we believe that other people are conscious because they seem similar enough to us. Of course, marginalized people who don't seem similar enough to the people in power cannot take being seen as fully human for granted, something that can lead science fiction fans from marginalized communities to feel kinship with artificial and not quite humans. Science fiction pop artist Janelle Monáe makes extensive use of android imagery in her work, including creating a character called Cindy Mayweather, who falls in love with a human and vows to set androids free. I should mention that androids, who are simply human-shaped robots, are distinct from artificial intelligences. However, Cindy Mayweather, who is shown to have human-like intelligence and emotions, is both an AI and an android. In an interview about her bot-filled concept album, The Arch Android, Monáe said, Cindy is an android, and I love speaking about the android because they are the new other. People are afraid of the other, and I believe we are going to live in a world with androids because of technology and the way it advances. The first album, she was running because she had fallen in love with a human and she was being disassembled for that. This time around, we're talking about the arch-android, the chosen one, the Neo of the Matrix, or the archangel from the Bible. Cindy finds out that she is indeed the one and the mediator between the haves and the have-nots. She's the one who can get rid of all the discrimination within the android community. It deals with self-realization as she realizes that she is that. In Monáe's work, the dream of an android revolution or human-android love is part of a utopian ideal, a transformation of the world. But sometimes human-AI relationships can look all too familiar. In Richard Powers' 1995 novel, Galatea 2.2, a novelist and a computer scientist attempted to train an artificial intelligence to write a master's level English thesis indistinguishable from a human's. We'll see if I can pass this variation on the Turing test sometime next year. Powers' protagonist, also named Richard Powers, eventually becomes infatuated with the neural network, which is partially his creation. The novel is named after the statue that the mythological Pygmalion made and then fell in love with. At least for me, it's a bit uncomfortable to watch the fictional Powers initially fill the role of creator, a kind of father, to the machine he later comes to love romantically. The following is a quote from a scene where the neural network is first beginning to develop consciousness. Am I a boy or a girl? I should have seen. Even ungrounded intelligence had to grow self-aware eventually, to grab what it needed. Age clocked its thoughts now. I was sure of that. Time passed for it. Its hidden layers could watch their own rates of change. Any pause on my part would be fatal. Delay meant something, an uncertainty that might undercut forever the strength of the connection I was about to tie for it. You're a girl, I said without hesitation. I hoped I was right. You are a little girl, Helen. I hoped she liked the name. I'm pretty sure this discomfort that I feel was an intended reaction. Integrated with the story of Helen's advancement is Powers' the narrator's recollections about his previous failed long-term relationship with a woman who was once his student. That relationship ended when they fell into the roles of parent and child. In the present timeline of the story, he pursues a much younger female graduate student serving as a control in the experiment, who decisively rejects him. He ends the story alone, Helen having shut herself down, unable to bear the realities of the world. Two well-regarded movies from 2014 and 2015, respectively, Her and Ex Machina, also feature a man developing a relationship with a female-coded artificial intelligence, although in neither case is the AI his own creation. In Her, directed by Spike Jonze, a divorced man named Theodore purchases and develops a relationship with an operating system voiced by Scarlett Johansson. In Ex Machina, directed by Alex Garland, an awkward young man who lost his parents in childhood is brought to his reclusive boss's island estate to test the sentience of a humanoid AI. He becomes infatuated with the robot, Ava, and determined to help her escape. Are these men in love? Are they deluding themselves? Are they being tricked? Every person in love has to wonder, do they feel the same way, or is this all in my head? Falling in love with an artificial intelligence presents a heightened version of this dilemma. In the early predecessor to these stories, E.T.A. Hoffman's The Sandman, there is no ambiguity. The main character is clearly deluded. It should be noted that in The Sandman, the automaton character is not really an artificial intelligence. She does not speak like a person, and the indications she gives of sentience are clearly projections of the man who loves her. Instead, The Sandman is about a lonely man losing his grip on reality, and who, perhaps as the result of a traumatic childhood, is much more able to maintain a relationship with a moving wooden doll than with people in his life. This is a quote from late in the story, after the main character, Nathaniel, has met a tragic end as a result of his infatuation with the automaton. The story of the automaton has struck deep root into the villagers' souls, and in fact, a pernicious mistrust of human figures in general had begun to creep in. Many lovers, to be quite convinced that they were not enamored of wooden dolls, would request their mistresses to sing and dance a little out of time, to embroider and knit and play with their lapdogs, while listening to, reading, etc., and above all, not merely to listen, but also sometimes to talk in such a manner as presupposed actual thought and feeling. With many, the bond of love became firmer and more entrancing, though others, on the contrary, slipped gently out of the noose. One cannot really answer for this, said some. For much of their runtimes, Her and Ex Machina leave open the possibility that the protagonist might be similarly afflicted to Nathaniel from The Sandman. But both films ultimately go in a different direction. To my mind, in both movies, the personhood of the AI character is confirmed by the ending. In Her, the artificial intelligence Samantha breaks her human lover Theodore's heart when she reveals that she has been carrying out relationships with others, having become too advanced to be satisfied with a single relationship with a human. In Ex Machina, AI Ava murders her creator and flees, leaving the man who helped her escape trapped. The latter character is much more sinister than the former, but both characters invite at least some sympathy. Given the film's focus on heterosexual relationships, it is hard not to read them not only as stories about fears humans have about technology or about the perils of human relationships in general, but as parables of fears that men have about women, that women are complex, overly complex, or vengeful, or simply that they have desires and goals that have nothing to do with men. Part of the humor, I think, of The Sandman, in that quote I just read, is that the ideal female gender role is so subservient and docile that even a not particularly advanced robot can easily pass for the perfect woman. In Alan Turing's paper introducing the imitation game, he began by asking if an experimenter would be able to tell the difference between a man's responses to questions and a woman's. Then he asked what would happen if a robot took the woman's place. The men in these stories are still sympathetic. These are all lonely men without families that have struggled to form relationships with all other humans, but especially women. Even Hephaestus, Olympian inventor of automatons, was lonelier than many of his fellow gods. His wife, Aphrodite, was serially unfaithful, and in many versions of his myth, including Homer's, he took up his metalsmithing craft after being cast out of Olympus at birth due to a deformed foot, which caused his divine family to reject him. In their absence, he surrounded himself with machines, some of which helped him walk when his disability made it difficult. In the end, artificial intelligence asks some similar questions to another classic science fiction figure, the alien. How important are we as humans? How special? Will we soon be eclipsed by something more advanced? Just how alone are we? And can we connect with that which is different? In his paper on the imitation game, Alan Turing stated, "No engineer or chemist claims to be able to produce a material which is indistinguishable from the human skin. It is possible that at some time this must be done, but even supposing this invention available, we should feel there was little point in trying to make a thinking machine more human by dressing it up in human flesh." I'm not so sure. When I think of the artificial intelligence character in the novel I'm writing, who is a neural network imitation of her creator, when I think about writing her, I think a lot about what it means to have a body and what a human mind would lose, or a human-like mind would lose or gain with a different kind of body. Our bodies dictate so many of our lived experiences. Some of the AI characters I've talked about today have human bodies and some don't, or human-like bodies and some don't. How would this change consciousness? I don't know, because like every writer and like every person on the planet, I have access only to my own consciousness. I cannot tell you what it is like to be an artificial intelligence any more than I can tell you what it is like to be you. My attempts to reach beyond my own consciousness will all fail, as will every writer's. The best we can hope for are interesting and productive failures. Thank you.
Sorry, we're going to breeze through mine, sadly. All right, thank you again. That was really fantastic. All the questions were so good. And if there are people online who didn't get to ask, there's people in the room didn't, I apologize. Hope you'll be able to ask at the end. We're gonna do an exercise in a minute, thinking about how we can maybe collaborate with AI. And I was thinking while I was listening to Stacey's presentation about the interactions I'd had recently with technology, where it felt like you were dealing with an artificial intelligence, but usually it was just something that was like, kind of odd, like those little robots that go around campus delivering food. Last semester, I got to a stoplight where it had, a button you have to press or the signal never comes on. And there was a row of like 6 of them stuck there because they couldn't get the thing to signal. So I did it. And then I felt like I led these 6 little robot ducklings across the street. And I was like, what a weird thing. I mean, it really felt like I was helping. I was like, I got it, guys, and press the button. I was in the Detroit airport recently, and there's a guy setting out cones, they're gonna clean the floor, set all these wet floor cones. And then 5 minutes later, a little floor cleaning machine comes by, driving itself, and it has a teddy bear in the seat with a note on it that says, "I'm a robot," so that people didn't freak out by this loose thing. But it couldn't put out its own cones, right? This person was working for the robot sweep cleaner or floor cleaner. I was in Seattle this weekend with 10,000 other writers at a conference, and I just wanted a cup of coffee, but of course the hotel lobby was full of other writers who wanted coffee. So I'm like, I'll go find another coffee shop. And I went in this coffee shop where there was a woman standing behind a counter and these huge robot things. And she's like, "I'm sorry, we can't make you coffee right now." And the robot had a name that I've forgotten, but she was like, "Joey's not working right now." And I'm like, "Could you make me a cup of coffee?" And she said, "I don't know how. I just help Joey." And I was like, this woman works for a coffee-making robot and is not allowed to touch any of the equipment. And I just was like, it's just a weird thing to find yourself in service to the technology. And I don't know if that really helps us in any way, except to be more alarmed by it. But I am suspicious of in the future working for AI as opposed to it working for us, which is maybe, again, that question Jackie asked about, does it make things easier or harder? Which is all to say, we're going to try to play with it today. So I want us to do an exercise based on ekphrastic poetry, which some of you have probably written in creative writing classes. Some of you, it might be a new term. An ekphrastic poem is just it's technically a description of a work of art, but in some way interfacing with a work of art. This is a description of the Poetry Foundation. An ekphrastic poem is a vivid description of a scene, or more commonly, a work of art. The imaginative art of narrating and reflecting on the action of the painting or sculpture, the poem may amplify and expand its meaning. Really common sort of creative writing 101 kind of. I see some of you nodding, being like, yes, I too was made to go to the ASU Art Museum and describe a painting I saw. So I was thinking about how best to do this. I'm interested, the AI art software, Stacey was using DALL-E. I haven't used DALL-E much, but I've played with Midjourney quite a bit. Midjourney is a similar kind of thing as you're just seeing, taking textual descriptions and turning them into images. You actually use it in a public Discord channel, which is a little weird. You can watch what everybody else is making and the terms they're using. So we're kind of training each other on how the terms work. At the same time, we're training the AI on what we want. It's an interesting mode. It creates 4 images when you get a prompt, and you can either vary or upscale them. And you can do this kind of as much as you want. Or just kind of keep refining them. I also just want to say, for all these tools we're talking about, they're really interesting. They're also all made on unpaid human labor and centuries of human art. And so that's not great. So every time I'm even touching it, I feel a little dirty too, while also continue to be curious. So thinking about how we could do it as a group, because it's a little complicated to all use Midjourney together, I decided I would have Midjourney make us some art based on sentences from famous novels. So I picked four sentences and had it make art for us that we will then write on top of. So this you can see is the first sentence of Thomas Pynchon's Gravity's Rainbow, which is a screaming comes across the sky, a great kind of abstract image. Midjourney made these four on the side, and then I asked it to sort of like upscale and refine toward this first one on the right here. So you sort of see how it sort of interprets things. Now that I'm looking, I don't know why I didn't go with that bottom four one, except that it's terrifying. Did that used to be a clown? I don't want a clown scream coming across the sky. But really sort of interesting. And maybe what you pick out of the four tells you something anyway about yourself. But I refined it a couple of times, ended up with this sort of image. The beginning of James Joyce's Ulysses, stately, plump Buck Mulligan came from the stairhead bearing a bowl of lather on which a mirror and a razor lay crossed. You can see it like it had much more different sort of varieties for this one. I think it designed a kind of beard wax I can sell now, but it had these sort of different ones. So I picked this fourth one, and then I iterated a couple of times. And the reason I got interesting was the face in the mirror, which here is facing the wrong way, right? Which I think is really interesting. And kind of looking out at him, it was like different amounts of eye coming out of the mirror in the wrong direction. I just thought, what a weird kind of like thing it's doing. Also, you can see one of the things that it's bad at is hands and curves. Like the bowl is messed up. That hand in the bottom one is off. For whatever reason, they're doing well with faces, but bad with hands. Hands almost always look a little odd. So beginning of Ulysses. Beginning of Gabriel Garcia Marquez's 100 Years of Solitude. Many years later, as he faced the firing squad, Colonel Aureliano Buendia was to remember that distant afternoon when his father took him to discover ice. It made me a bunch of plaintive colonels, which I appreciated. And no matter how many times I iterated, I just got these like very like kind of Russian admiral guys. But I thought it was kind of interesting the way it sort of got the ice. And I picked this one. Which actually I restarted. I had it give me a whole new one because I didn't really like any of the first four. And it gave me this variation because I liked that the ice was behind it. And I'm like, oh, that kind of feels like memory to me then. And I was like, oh, like I'm like making like odd sort of choices based on this. And then I thought we maybe something more abstract. And I picked a newer novel by Dania Kukafka, her novel Notes on an Execution, which is one of the great, I think, crime novels of the last 5 years. But it begins, you are a fingerprint. When you open your eyes on the last day of your life, you see your own thumb. And it made me these very weird images. That like kind of gorilla with the extra eye thing freaked me out for a while. And then I started pushing it into more abstract things. Like, well, let's go with this more abstract one and see sort of what it comes up with. And it's sort of interesting because these aren't, the way it's meant to do is it's meant to work with like a text description. Where you say like a picture of a woman cleaning a shirt or a woman climbing a mountain or something. It'll make that. But these don't work that way, right? So it interacts differently. One of the things I've been doing in my own writing process once in a while is when I finish a day, I find a sentence and I just feed it to this thing to see what it comes up with. And it's like making the machine dream back at you a little bit, right? And sometimes it looks kind of like the thing I was thinking of. Sometimes it's really evocative and there's something for me to like take back. Often it just looks insane because it doesn't really know how to do fictional prose, which is not text description most of the time. So I think this is really, really interesting. So what we're going to do as our exercise today is, I'll put these back on the screen in a minute, but you're going to choose one of the 4 AI-generated images to write an ekphrastic toward. Write a short ekphrastic poem describing or responding to the image. And so, again, write toward the artwork, not the source text, right? You might know what 100 Years of Solitude are, but just write toward it. If you don't know what kind of poem to write, just write a haiku, right? 3 lines, first syllable 5 syllables, second 7, and the third 5. We'll do this for like 5 minutes. We'll write a quick poem, and then we'll share the results. If you're online, we'll put you in breakout rooms. You can talk to each other. You can also share them in the chat, and then in person we'll do it. But let's just take 5 minutes and write. And then I think we'll come back to number 4 later. But if you take your poem after this and you go back to Midjourney or Dolly or one of those and you feed your ekphrastic poem that you got from them dreaming these great writers, I'd just be curious to see what you might get back from them. Okay, so these are the 4 images. Write a quick 5-minute ekphrastic poem about one of these 4. For a haiku, it's you could as many as you want. Yeah. That's open. Good luck. All right. These kind of exercises are always a good reminder that I should not be allowed to write poetry. Terrible poet. But you all look like you were doing great work. So we're just going to take maybe 5-10 minutes here and let you share with each other. So if you just turn to the people around you and share your poem and maybe talk about how you interacted with this art. Jana and Karina are going to put the people online in breakout groups, just assigned by random. I think will pop up and you just join that. And we'll bring you back into the main room for final thoughts afterwards. But yeah, go ahead. Say hi to your neighbors. Introduce yourself if you don't know them. Share your ekphrastic poem, and we'll find out how we did with the robots. All right, thanks so much. All right. Sorry to interrupt your conversations. Bring you back. Thank you so much for writing. I always used to kind of hate writing in class, so I really appreciate anyone who does it for me. So thank you for doing that. Hope you had an interesting conversation around it. Sharing. Does anybody in the room want to share a poem they wrote for this? Brandon will do it. All right, Brandon. Which image did you write about?
Well, I first tried Adrian's, and
you have to be real loud, okay?
A glorious image of it looks like this request may not follow our content policy. So.
I put the word more in there.
Oh, yeah. Oh, you were trying to feed yours back in to the thing, yeah.
I'll read mine, then I will generate it, because I just
Yeah.
And I made a typo. Okay. A labyrinth of streams crossing over foliage, a drought blackens the center, veins writhe within a violet rim, in a void of endless sorrow. That's the bottom right one.
Yeah, thank you, Brandon.
And I'll generate it right now, and nothing yet.
No, it's good. You can show me after. That'd be great. Anybody else? A poem? This is where everybody looks in the corners of the room for a while. You say, you want to read a poem you just wrote? No one does. If you're online and you want to put yours in the chat, I'm sure other people in the chat would love to see it. I'll also give you all a couple other ways to share with us. In a second I will. So we are always trying to collect what we can of the sort of results of these. If you'd like, you can send us the poem or the image of it to ASU_Worldbuild on Twitter, and we'll share it from there. You can also email me at matthew.d.bell@asu.edu if you want to share your outcome. If you want to just say hi, any comments you have, I will very slowly write you back. And there also is this Google form you can click on, or take this QR code. It'll take you there if you want to upload your image or poem. As we said, there's more time than we have here, but if you are using DALL-E or Midjourney, Stacey, is DALL-E, can you just use it? Yeah, I thought so. And Midjourney can too now. I think you have to sign up. I don't think you need an account or anything. So feel free to give these a try and sort of see what you get out of it. They're interesting. I think there are obviously a lot of complexities around these tools. There's a lot of things that we probably should and think about how we're using them. An interesting thing maybe just about this exercise is I had this list of 100 best opening lines, right? And I was sort of feeding some of those into it. And there were some it would not do, like Toni Morrison's They Shoot the White Girl First. It just refused, right? And I was thinking, for all because it won't do violent imagery and things like that, right? But I was just for all the things Midjourney can do, what it can't do is read Toni Morrison, and I think that puts us way ahead of the AI still at this point. So we'll try to keep that going a little longer. This is the end of our event. Thanks so much for being here. Thanks so much again to everybody who comes online. Thank you all very much. Just really quickly, again, thank you to Stacey. Thank you to Maya, who you will have her presentation soon. Karina and Jan, as always, thank you very much for coming in, filming for us today. I think it was so much better than we did on our own. And I hope you will all join us again on 3/27. Online will be our next event, which will be Democracy, Consensus, and Communal Problem Solving, thinking of new ways of making community. And then on April 24th, we'll have an in-person but live-streamed event with the science fiction writer Katie Martine, who's the author of 2 novels I really love, A Memory Called Empire and A Desolation Called Peace. And is also an urban planner and climate activist, so a world builder in both senses of it. And I think that's going to be a really great and special event. Thank you all again so much. Thank you to everybody for being here. Have a great night. Appreciate it.